The scalping EA that I shared as the first EA, I thought it was a very simple EA to understand. What surprised me is when people started to share with me their results following the settings that I use. And those results were extremely different. There are some fundamental settings that are probably not clear, and that is what's driving the differences in results. So today we're going to look at the most important settings of the EA. We will also look at the fundamental requirements of this EA. And lastly, I will speak about the use of this scalping robot on Propfirms and what can we do to make it more suitable to Propfirm challenges. So with no more shenanigans, let's start. Let's start with the results. So I created this account on the 19th of December last year, specifically because when people are sharing their results with me, then at least I have something to compare with. So if we look around, we do have a few losses where the initial stop loss was hit. Most of the time, the EA starts trailing the stop loss very aggressively once we are in the profitable territory. So therefore, you see that all those trades are closed upon hitting the stop loss, but in profit. And occasionally, the EA also hits a TP here or there when the market moves in one direction quite quickly, especially on Bitcoin. That happens a lot more. Overall, the EA made about 13% profit in 1 month on a 5,000 euro deposit. Now, if we look symbol by symbol, Bitcoin made around 7%, 350 euros in total. On Bitcoin, you will also have a few times the TP is hit despite aggressive trailing of the stop loss, as Bitcoin, when it goes fast, it really goes fast in one direction. Then on Euro USD, we have about 3% return, 150 euros, which is break even in my books because if the next trade goes into loss, that's going to hit 3% negative, so it's going to come back to zero. Gold made around 2.5% in profit, a bit below the break even, as one stop loss hit of 3% will wipe that out, but it is so far without any loss. GBP USD took 2 losses, so around 1.5% in negative. Nasdaq also a very similar story. One loss trade of 3%, almost covered by 5 profit trades. Now banking on the 90% win rate, it is heading in the right direction. And lastly, the USD JPY, which is also around 3% in profit. So far, no losing trade. So in my book, it is at break even because if the next trade goes to hit the stop loss, all of this profit is going to be wiped out. So non-forex pairs are sort of doing okay, carrying their own weight. Bitcoin doing quite well because it has recently been a very strong trend. On another account that I set up only for Bitcoin, Gold and Nasdaq as a trial. Now here, one of the key settings which is different than the other account is how many number of bars are used to determine the highs and low. So on the previous account that we saw, it was 100 bars in, and here we're using only 5. And overall, we have 15% return in a month, which is quite similar. Now on gold, we have 7% return. On Bitcoin, around 11%. And Nasdaq is doing poorly here as well with a negative 2% return. So these settings have made similar percentage returns even though no forex pair was applied. And the trading patterns and the style are also very different between the 2 years with just one setting change. Okay, these are only 1 month of results, so take them with a grain of salt. So with the 5,000 euro account, I have set it up on Euro USD, GBP USD, USD JPY, Nasdaq, gold, and Bitcoin. For the settings, I'm using the same settings that I've shared in the videos. So 200, 220, and 10 for the forex pairs, and 0.4, 0.45, and 10 for the non-forex pair, which corresponds to the forex settings in terms of price. Now I'm using the news filter, and I'm avoiding NFP, JOLTS, non-farm, and interest rate, but only for the USD currency, because that is what moves the market suddenly and is prone to slippages. And I normally do not like to trade in those kind of conditions. I'm using the RSI filter on 4-hour chart, with 20 and 80. So when the price is in extreme on 4-hour chart, I don't want to be trading. I'm currently not using the moving average filter, but depending on how markets turn out to be in the future, I might be using it in the coming months. Now, one big setting that I've changed here from default is the number of bars to identify the highs and lows. And I've moved it to 100 from 5 that I shared in the videos. Most of the settings are self-explanatory. For example, time frames, lot sizes, trading hours, and those kind of things. But there are 2 settings which are most likely causing a little bit of confusion. The first one is the number of bars to define highs and lows. If you remember from the very first video in this series, we said that if there are 5 candles on the right and the 5 candles on the left, all below the middle candle, that's a valid high. And the reverse is true for the low. But what if you were to set that setting to 50 or 100? Then there will need to be 100 candles to the left and 100 candles to the right, all below the middle candle for it to become a valid high. So what difference does it make? With 5 bars on the left and 5 bars on the right, that's going to happen quite a lot. So every time the market breaks a previous high and goes up and then comes back down, you will have a new high to trade. But with 100 candle now, the EA not only has to find 100 candles to the left, but also 100 candles to the right. And that's quite rare. And therefore, the highs and lows established are going to be on more established prices. And the second confusion is normally coming from setting stop losses, take profits, the trigger of the stop loss and the trailing stop loss as a percentage of price rather than fixed values. The idea basically came from Bitcoin was $20,000, then it was $40,000 and $50,000 and $100,000. Say if Bitcoin is trading at $100,000 and we set the value as TP and stop loss as 0.4% of the price and trigger of the stop loss as 10% of the stop loss and trailing stop loss as 5% of the stop loss. And if a trade is taken on Bitcoin at 100,000 mark exactly, our TP and stop loss is going to be set at 0.4% of 100,000, so 400 points away from the price. So at 100,000, 400 and 96,600. 10% of that is the trigger of our stop loss. So once the market moves in our favorable direction by that much points, that's when the trailing of the stop loss will start. So price will need to be above 100,040 mark before the trailing stop loss will trigger. And the trailing stop loss itself is 5% of 400. So it's 20. So at any point in time, once it has been triggered, it will trail the current prices in the market by 20 points. Let's look at some of the requirements of the EA as well. This EA will work on any pair as long as the spreads are tight. Then best to use a standard account because the EA starts trailing the stop loss once you are in profit. And if you're using a commission-based account, I haven't written the code in a way so the EA doesn't know about the commission. So it will start trailing the stop loss even though you're still in negative. Now, if you have to use a commission-based account, then at least increase the trigger of the stop loss setting by at least 5 points more to compensate for that commission. And as we already spoke, this EA is a trend-based EA. And the last one is the ability to trail the stop loss very, very close. And this brings us to our last point of discussion, which is about prop firms. Now, most of the prop firms, as far as I understand them, do not allow for a trailing stop loss very close to the price, or they might have a requirement on how frequently you can update the stop loss. And that kills the entire strategy. So over the last few weeks, I've been thinking and I've come up with some ideas on how to circumvent these requirements and use a different method for the trailing of the stop loss while still keeping the win rate close to our current setup. I'm finishing the final touches on that, and hopefully within the next 2 weeks, I will be releasing another version of this scalping robot, but with a different trailing mechanism that suits the prop firms better. So until next time, guys, stay safe, trade safe.